Our guest today is Josh Androsky, who is a comedian and a writer and also an organizer here in the LA area. And one of the big causes he's taken up right now is public banking. Josh, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be on. Glad to talk about public bank. Glad you're wearing the Cure shirt.
Of course. You know what? Yesterday I wore a State of Alert t-shirt. Today I'm wearing a Cure t-shirt.
I'm wearing a Black Band t-shirt also. Shannon and the Clams with two-part kissing.
Love it. Yes. This is comedians that are politically active wearing band t-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
That's a podcast that needs to happen, man. What do you? Yeah, let's talk shop after this.
Honestly, that's so much better than comedians in cars drinking coffee.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this, man. So you got a very upfront, straight up question via viewer, and I feel like there's no more appropriate way to start. So let's start as basic as it gets. What is public banking?
That's a great question. So when we talk about public banking, we're talking about public money. So specifically, that means tax dollars, fees, utility payments, the money that a municipality collects from the residents of the municipality. So what happens now, the status quo, is that all of that money that gets collected is put into for-profit banks, ones that may or may not be currently negotiating fraud settlements because of widespread fraudulent activity. Banks that use that money to then create the amount of capital to loan and invest in the, I mean, let's be fucking honest. The word, can I curse on this?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
It's encouraged.
Good. So the what's happening now is our tax dollars unwittingly are going to help the worst people in the world profit off of the worst things in the world. So like literally, if you live in Los Angeles right now or pretty much anywhere, you buy ice cream and your sales tax goes unbeknownst to you to help some translucent millionaire profit off of the literal cages that are separating undocumented families. Like that is the truth. That is not an exaggeration. And we're talking cigarettes, we're talking weapons, both like domestic guns and, international bombs. We're talking private prisons, horrifying pipelines like the Keystone Pipeline, literally the worst of the worst shit. And for this privilege, right, of us giving our public money to these banks so they can gamble, also the mortgage-backed securities that like destroyed the economy. For the privilege of this, the banks, they don't pay us. They actually charge us hundreds of millions of dollars in fees. And we owe in Los Angeles around 3.14 billion in debt services, which is like interest payments and stuff, along with fees per year. And for those listeners or watchers, viewers, for those Rorschachs out there, the Watchmen out there, that
they're actually executive producers.
Oh, okay.
I like to say, like, I am the only show in the world that I know of where the audience is my executive producer, because again, none of this shit's planned on my part.
Right. So for the executive producers watching out there who with an eye or sort of an ear that like 3.14, that's pi. And it is, which is, the bankers made it up. And it seems so appropriate that bankers would create a pie of wealth and then not give the rest of us even a single slice, So that's what's happening now. A public bank would just be a simple publicly owned, like not like publicly traded, like literal government institution that just holds our public money. And then because it's a public institution, we would be able to hold it accountable. You can't hold Lloyd Blankfein accountable. It would be, right now we're modeling it after a German banking model that is responsible for funding like 70-something% of their renewable energy. And that's what we think we can do here, right? Is if it's a publicly owned entity, then it will be able to do things that the private sector has so far just refused to do, which is to create infrastructure for climate change, and also like permanent supportive housing, affordable low-income housing, things like that, things that we need. And one final thing, just to kind of wrap it all up, one way to really show how awful the current system is that right now, whenever we in California spend $1 on infrastructure, 50 cents of that dollar ends up in a banker's pocket because of interest. And so starting a public bank alone, just starting it, would effectively double the amount that we're able to improve our schools, or, you know, create this climate infrastructure that is so desperately needed to make sure that our grandkids don't, you know, don't go down to the flooded remains of what used to be downtown LA.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you just a kind of messaging question, because you guys have been gaining some momentum here in LA, which is freaking great.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure a lot of the people that you talk to, they know what the big banks are doing. So you know, they're definitely already hip to that message. But there's certainly some people out there, and I'm sure you know this way better than me, but there's definitely some people out there that they're like, what do you mean my bank is like doing bad stuff? Like those connections aren't something that people are always just cognizant of in their daily lives. It's not that they wouldn't care if they knew, they just don't know. So how do you kind of just 30-second, boom, this is why it's important? Like when you're just out on the streets or something like that.
Right. So a big thing to get into it is to ask people, you know, we live in Los Angeles, we don't live in Wall Street. Ask people how much money you think the city of Los Angeles owes Wall Street every year. And usually people will say, I don't know, a couple $1 million. Like, you're asking me this question. And then when we say it's actually like in the billions, then I think that sort of wakes people up. And then what we like to do, because especially like nowadays, when you see after the 2016 election, you know, you can't really, people don't go to vote against stuff as much as they go to vote because they believe in something and have hope for the future. So what we like to do is to try to, you know, get people to recognize
a little pie in the sky, by the way.
Right. Well, I mean, sorry. You know, I didn't want to give everybody a pony. Sorry if Al Giordano is one of your executive producers.
Instant abs over here.
But what we like to do is we like to say, if you were in charge of the city of Los Angeles, what would you do with $3 billion? Right? How would you spend this money? Because ultimately, you're going to be a shareholder of this bank. Like, have you ever been a shareholder before? Most people haven't. And so that idea that we get some sort of like self-interest and decision-making capability with how these billions of dollars can be used to help our city, I think that has shown that it inspires people into thinking like, wow, like, I guess maybe we could end the worst homelessness epidemic in history, you know, or maybe we could make sure that our schools, like right now, I think we're the fourth lowest spending. We spend the fourth lowest of any state on schools in California, which goes way against our like idea of what we are. We spend more on prisoners than we do on students, you know, stuff like that. Like, to be like, let's do more stuff. Let's get more things.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news on with Ron.